9,900 years after the ancient calamity, a new member of the royal family was born into the kingdom. The daughter of the Hyrulean king at the time, Rhombos Hyrule, and his unnamed queen, named in accordance to the ancient tradition that each princess born into the royal family would be named in honor of the mortal incarnation of goddess Hylia, Zelda. Shortly after her birth, the Queen of Hyrule took Zelda to Gerudo Town, as she wanted her close friend, Urbosa, the Gerudo chief, to meet her little bird, as she called her, who quickly grew enamored of the young princess, remarking that she had never seen such unconditional love from a mother to a child.
Sometime following Zelda's birth, a mysterious Hylian fortune teller named Astor relayed a prophecy to the kingdom which predicted the revival of the Calamity.
The signs of a resurrection of Calamity Ganon are clear, and the power to oppose it lies dormant beneath the ground.
Astor was secretly a prophet plotting to revive Calamity Ganon, a dark sorcerer who joined forces with the Yiga clan, Sheikah traitors who became loyal followers of Ganon to bring about the fall of the kingdom. From the shadows, this sinister group pulled strings to ensure the revival and successful takeover of Calamity Ganon, a plan which required the discovery of the ancient relics of 10,000 years ago. The kingdom decided to act on this prophecy and began several excavations across the land. With the help of the group that once created the technology, the Sheikah, it wasn't long until they began to unearth the ancient technology of old, finding the 4 divine beasts and the army of mechanical guardians that had once fought alongside the ancient hero against the Calamity. The findings of these ancient relics proved that the tales of Calamity Ganon were no mere legends, but actual history, and the terrifying realization that his return was on the horizon began to sink in.
In the distant village of Hateno, a young Hylian boy was born into a family of knights, who would come to be known to the people of the land as Link, a curious and energetic young boy who would grow up to be a great swordsman, besting the most trained adults in combat even at a young age. It was clear that this boy was destined for greatness. Not much is known of his early life, although concept art of creating a champion shows a photograph of the young Hylian alongside his presumed sister and possible grandfather, reminiscent of Ariel, Link's sister from the Wind Waker, and Smith, Link's blacksmith grandfather from the Minish Cap, perhaps references to the past families of the hero, their actual existence within the timeline yet to be confirmed, although there is no real evidence to suggest they didn't. Although we don't know anything about Link's mother, we learn that Link's father was a knight of Hyrule, serving to protect the kingdom. When Link was 4 years old, he accompanied his father and the other knights to Sora's domain, as they traveled to the home of the aquatic race to show respect to Dorephan, the newly crowned Sora king, at the request of the Hylian monarch. It was here that Link first met Mipha, princess of the Sora and daughter to King Dorephan, who possessed a unique power among her people, the power of healing, one which is demonstrated as she healed the bruises of the reckless Link, who adorably gazed at the young Sora with admiration and awe.
At around the age of 5, Princess Zelda finished constructing a miniature guardian that she would name Terrako, an artificial egg-shaped pet with a unique personality. It's unclear whether they merely found this guardian during the excavations and repaired it, or if it was constructed from scratch, perhaps from small pieces of ancient technology unearthed during the expeditions. As Zelda screwed in the last bolt within Terrako, making the miniature guardian fully operational, Zelda turned around happily to show her work to her mother, the Queen, who proudly watched as her young, brilliant daughter worked on the small guardian. As mentioned by Monster Maze on his theory, perhaps the Queen and Zelda built Terrako together, a bonding exercise between a mother and a daughter, and that the queen herself programmed Zelda's lullaby, a melody closely tied to the princess from time immemorial, within Terrako, for the guardian to play the melancholic melody when Zelda was upset as a means to cheer her up. When Princess Zelda was 6 years old, the Queen of Hyrule passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. Her death came as a total shock to the kingdom, and affected both Zelda and Rome greatly. Zelda never cried after she passed, not in the royal funeral nor in private, something that her father, the king, thought was due to their constant reminders to be a valiant and steady princess. The king was left to raise her all alone, and Zelda was left without a mother and mentor who could teach her how to harness her divine powers. When Zelda silently gazed upon the night sky from the bridge leading to her study, quietly grieving for her mother, Terrako consoled her by playing her lullaby. Placing her hand on the small companion, she asked him if he would not leave her like her mother did, to which the small guardian emitted a series of reassuring whistles. When Zelda turned 7, the king commanded that she begin her training to awaken her sealing power, necessary if they were to be successful against Calamity Ganon. As he deemed Terrako a distraction of her duties as a princess, seeing the guardian as a mere toy rather than a sentient being, the king confiscated Terrako from the young princess, despite her pleas for him not to.
Urbosa, close friend of Zelda's mother, was devastated by her passing. She naturally attended the funeral to pay respects to her, and would come to miss her friend ever since. Urbosa came to be really close with Zelda, in a way becoming a sort of mother figure for the princess. A year since the last time she saw the princess, Urbosa traveled to Hyrule to meet her. After speaking to the king, he allowed the Gerudo chief to keep Zelda company as she went to the spring to train. There, Zelda prayed until the sun set, forcing Urbosa to drag her out after she passed out in the icy waters. Zelda opened up to Urbosa about her concerns of not being able to awaken her sacred powers, believing there was something wrong with her. All Urbosa could do was comfort her. The king pushed her to continue her training without cease, as the situation was dire with the imminent return of Ganon in the horizon. Despite the pain it cost him to do so, he continued to act as a king and not as a father, scolding Zelda whenever she deviated her attention from her divine duty.
Princess Zelda spoke with Mipha, the Sheikah royal advisor responsible for the research into ancient technology. She introduced her to her older sister, Pura, and her assistant Robbie, 2 extraordinary researchers of the Sheikah tribe, whom Zelda soon joined in their research, fascinated by the ancient technology of 10,000 years ago. Learning of Zelda's day off from training, the king once again scolded her for not committing her full attention to awakening her divine power, only adding more pressure and burden to the princess. Despite this, Zelda continued on with her research into ancient relics. The following day, Zelda embarked on an excavation with Pura and Robbie. It didn't take long for them to uncover a peculiar piece of Sheikah technology, a small stone tablet with Sheikah text engraved on it, its purpose unclear for the time being. At the suggestion of Pura, they decided to call it the Sheikah Slate. After some experimentation, they were able to restore some functionality to the slate, discovering that it was able to produce true-to-life images, but knew that it still had many uses yet to be uncovered. With the Sheikah Slate at hand and the genius research of Robbie, they succeeded in activating all 4 of the divine beasts, and the Guardians, with much effort, were beginning to be returned to working order too.
At some unspecified time, Link became the master of the sword that seals the darkness, that lay hidden within Korok Forest, under the protection of the guardian deity of the earth, the Great Calamity. Although the exact details of how he obtained the Master Sword are a complete mystery, it is speculated that the event occurred when he was around 12 or 13 years old. The truth, however, is that Link never possessed the sword that seals the darkness during his childhood. During Age of Calamity, the Master Sword is found within Korok Forest, Link, a knight in training, never used a sacred blade before that, and no one, not even himself, knew he was the hero who was destined to wield it.
Mipha would meet once again with Link after many years apart. The young boy she had once met, now an accomplished knight of Hyrule and keeper of the Master Sword. Mipha noticed how Link was much quieter and more serious than when they first met, knowing something had changed within him. Although she knew that deep down, he was still the kind person that she had met all those years ago. The reason for his sudden change in mood was due to the burden he had to carry as the wielder of the Sword of Evil's Bane, as with so much at stake and so many eyes upon him, he felt it necessary to stay strong and not show any emotion.
One day, the Goron hero Daruk saw a Hylian being attacked while he was looking for rocks to munch on. As he rushed to his rescue, he was shocked to find that the young Hylian had single-handedly defeated all the monsters by himself, something which Daruk greatly admired. While he was distracted by his admiration of the Hylian, a monster almost attacked the great Goron by surprise when he was slain by the Hylian. Daruk learned that his name was Link, and soon found out he had a tremendous appetite. The Hylian was willing to eat just about anything that was presented to him, so Daruk offered him his favorite food, rock roast, which Link ate without hesitation, proving to Daruk that Hylians could also eat rocks just like the mighty Gorons. Following this exchange, Link and Daruk became great friends, Daruk seeing Link as a true Goron brother, a title that the Hero of Time once earned in the distant past from Goron Chief Darunia himself, given to those who proved their strength and valor to the Goron tribe. Roughly around this time, the Rito warrior Revali earned the praise of all his tribe, who regarded him as the pride of the Rito after winning countless archery competitions and breaking all previous records. The Rito elder asked him what he would like as a prize for his achievements, to which he requested the creation of an archery training ground where he could hone his skills at varying elevations. This would start the construction of the flight range, where Revali would spend many hours practicing a new move that he had recently come up with.
With the Divine Beasts in working order, it was time to find 4 individuals to pilot these mechanical wonders. Princess Zelda, escorted by soldiers and maidens, travelled to each of the 4 races of Hyrule to meet with those who would become Hyrule's champions. Zelda first headed towards Rito village after having heard of the impressive feats of the Rito warrior Revali to ask him to become the pilot of Divine Beast Var Meadow. Revali asked her what their plan was, to which she explained that he would aid Link, the chosen hero, as he faced against Calamity Ganon. Revali thought the idea was completely absurd. He, a sidekick to some lowly Hylian knight? Surely that was a joke. Revali thought of declining the offer when he looked at the expectant eyes of the princess. He just couldn't bring himself to say no to her, but out of pride and self-respect, he delayed his response for a few days. When the princess returned to learn of his decision, she caught Revali mid-practice within the flight range, trying to master a new technique that would allow him to control updrafts. Summoning a giant gust of wind, he attempted to once again soar upward on the draft created by his power, before the strong winds threw him off balance, causing him to crash into the ground below. He soon noticed Princess Zelda watching him from a distance as he struggled back to his feet, who apologised for eavesdropping. Revali predicted that she came to learn of his answer, as she needed him to defeat Calamity Ganon, and told her that he would gladly join in the struggle. However, as Zelda began to thank him, the Rito warrior cut her off before summoning an updraft of wind in order to attempt to perform his technique once again, now in front of an audience, and royalty no less. As he kept himself suspended above the updraft, he quickly looked at the targets positioned around the flight range before diving down. Zelda watched in astonishment as Revali displayed his great archery skill, destroying multiple targets at once with the use of his Great Eagle bow, showing off to the princess as he flew around the flight range, disappearing and emerging from smoke generated from the explosions caused by his bomb arrows, finishing his spectacle by landing on the wooden railing of the flight range's landing platform, where he smugly told the princess that if Link lost his confidence after seeing him in action, he wouldn't be held responsible.
The princess made her way to Death Mountain, where she met up with the mighty Goron hero Daruk, who immediately accepted Zelda's request for him to pilot Divine Beast Vah Rudania. Zelda thanked him for agreeing to help, as he happily smiled back at her, after which he commented that monster activity had become more frequent recently, and wondered if it had to do with Calamity Ganon's return. He told Zelda that she should not leave her home without her horde of Gorons watching her back, to which she told him he sounded like her father, who was planning to appoint a knight as a personal protector, whom she heard was the most accomplished swordsman in all of Hyrule. As Daruk realized who she was talking about, they saw a group of bokoblins about to attack someone in the distance. Daruk unsheathed his mighty boulder breaker as he charged towards the monsters, landing a few blows before the cowardly monsters fled in fear of the Goron. As Zelda and her guards caught up with Daruk, they soon found the bokoblin's unfortunate victim, a black and white Hylian retriever who cowered behind a large boulder. The dog happily ran towards the princess, wagging his tail and licking her face, while she turned to Daruk with a perplexed look, as she found him trembling in fear, curling up into a ball and summoning his power of protection as the dog innocently barked at him. It seemed that Daruk, the mighty hero of the Gorons, had an irrational fear of dogs that sparked when he was chased by them as a small kid. After they waved the dog goodbye, the embarrassed Daruk jokingly asked Zelda if she knew if Calamity Ganon wasn't any kind of dog monster, before they both broke into a hysterical laughter.
Zelda travelled to the desert town of the Gerudo warriors to meet with her friend and Gerudo chief, Urbosa, to ask her to be the pilot of Divine Beast Vah Naboris. Within the court of Gerudo Town, Urbosa, sitting on the throne, accepted Zelda's request without hesitation, knowing that the Yiga clan not only planned to resurrect the Calamity, but had attempted to steal their precious Thunderhelm, a treasured heirloom of the Gerudo, and vowed that she would stop at nothing to ensure the defeat of Ganon. Zelda and Urbosa decided to go for a walk outside the walls of Gerudo Town after their meeting, strolling through the sands during the frigid night, catching up on lost time. It's here that Zelda told Urbosa that she'd never seen her that serious, who remarked that Zelda, calling her Little Bird, seemed much happier now than 10 years prior, when she didn't even smile. As Zelda asked her why she kept calling her Little Bird, Urbosa stopped dead in her tracks, as she directed her words to two travellers that circled around the town, drawing her Scimitar of the Seven, calling them traitors and remarking that unlike them she liked to face her foes head on, challenging them to a fight. Before Zelda could react, the two travellers removed their disguises, revealing themselves to be Yiga assassins, and engaged Urbosa in a ferocious fight. Displaying great skill both in the use of her sword and her control over lightning, Urbosa easily dispatched the two assassins, sparing their lives out of respect for the princess. The Yiga foot soldiers, admitting defeat, limped away before disappearing into a puff of smoke and papers, retreating back to their hidden base within the Gerudo Canyon. Urbosa turned to Zelda to answer her question, explaining that her mother used to call her Little Bird all the time when she was a baby, telling the princess that, despite the queen's passing, her little bird still spread her wings and became the beacon of hope Hyrule needed.
Zelda visited the Sora princess, Mipha, within Sora's domain, to ask her to become the pilot of Divine Beast Vah Ruta. Knowing of the dire situation that was the return of Calamity Ganon, and in order to play a part in protecting her people, Mipha agreed to help. However, her father, King Dorephan, and the other elders did not approve of this, as they didn't want her beloved princess in harm's way, and as such, forbade her from having anything to do with the divine beast. Sometime later, Link returned to Sora's domain to visit Mipha. Glad to see him, she told him of the recent troubles the Sora were facing, as a Lino that resided on Ploimos Mountain had recently been terrorizing the Sora people. Without a doubt in his mind, Link made his way towards the mountain, and despite his attempts to have Mipha return to the domain, the princess stubbornly stayed by his side, when they were suddenly attacked by the Lino. They were not harmed, however, as the heroic duo put up a great fight, Link displaying great skill against their ferocious foe, ending the mighty beast with a powerful spin attack. Following the defeat of the Lino, King Dorephan finally gave Mipha his blessing to pilot the divine beast, as with the threat of the Calamity fast approaching, the Sora would have to play a part in fending against it. On the brink of tears, King Dorephan made Mipha promise to return back home unharmed. With Mipha now appointed as the final pilot, Zelda and the Sora princess met at the top of the large waterfall of Ploimos Mountain. It is here that Mipha asked the Hylian princess who the other champions were, revealing them to be Goron Viligence, Daruk, Rito Confidence, Revali, Gerudo Spirit, Urbosa, and the Hylian chosen by the Master Sword, Link, the very mention of his name making the Sora princess blush. Looking down at the waters below, and tapping the side of the waterfall with her light-scaled trident, she called to the young Sora toddler who swam near the cascade, her younger brother, Prince Sidon, beckoning him to swim up the waterfall to meet them. When Zelda suggested that Sidon may be too young to swim at the waterfall on his own, Mipha told her that one day she would have to leave Sidon behind to pilot Varuta, before diving down to the pools below to meet her little brother, offering to go up the waterfall with him so he could get a feel for it. With Zelda looking down at the Sora siblings, Mipha, carrying young Sidon on her back, swam at the waterfall at tremendous speeds, their momentum ejecting them to the sky, landing on the stone platform, following a mid-air spin. Turning to her brother, Mipha kneeled down and told him that should anything ever happen to her, she counted on him to protect Sora's domain, knowing that her duties as a Sora champion were very dangerous, especially considering they would face the Calamity head-on. Mipha then asked Sidon if he wanted to try climbing the waterfall one more time, to which the young prince enthusiastically agreed, followed by a heartwarming laughter between the princess and her baby brother.
Having selected all 4 pilots of the Divine Beasts, and Link possessing the sword that seals the darkness, the king summoned each of them to the castle for a special inauguration ceremony. It's here that the king thanked the 5 heroes for accepting this brave task of becoming the protectors of Hyrule, officially bestowing upon them the title of Hyrule's Champions, a title which would solidify their unique bond, and handed them blue sacred garbs, crafted by Princess Zelda herself, its blue colour being a symbol of the royal family that had been passed down for countless generations. King Rome then entrusted Zelda with leading the champions, a task only the daughter of the royal family could fulfill, and together they would all protect the kingdom against Calamity Ganon. The people cheered for the newly appointed champions, and as fireworks were set off in the bright sky, the ceremony came to an end. The champions finally enjoyed a moment of rest, gathering under a small gazebo just outside the castle, where they directed their attention to the Sheikah slate, as Revali took it from Zelda's hands to inspect it closely before giving it to Mipha. Zelda explained how it still held many secrets yet to be uncovered, one of which, Urbosa explained, Zelda had shown to her, which allowed the user to take pictures. Amazed by this, Mipha asked Zelda for a favour as she looked back at Link and the other champions to take a picture with all of them to immortalise the moment. With Pura as the photographer, the champions awkwardly posed for the camera, clearly having never done anything similar to this before. However, as Pura began to count down from 3, Daruk, cheekily grinning, opened his arms and then...
click, snap!
The picture was taken as the others lost their balance due to Daruk closing his arms around them, their shocked expressions immortalised as a still image within the Sheikah slate's memory.
Within the courtyard of Hyrule Castle, one of the guardians that was being tested on by the Sheikah lost control and began to shoot deadly beams at everything in sight. Link, without hesitating, picked up a nearby pot lid from the ground and deflected one of the blasts right into the machine's weak spot, destroying it in the process. Catching the king's attention, he noted Link's unrivaled bravery and skill, and soon after, appointed him to be Zelda's own personal knight, his sole duty now being to protect Princess Zelda with his life.
At Daruk's request, the champions performed the fabled Ceremony of Legend in commemoration of Link's royal appointment as Zelda's protector. While Link knelt down before the princess, Zelda would recite the blessings of the goddess Hylia, in which legendary events of the past were subtly mentioned.
Whether skyward bound, adrift in time, or steeped in the glowing embers of twilight, the sacred blade is forever bound to the soul of the hero.
Despite Zelda's best efforts to do her part in the ceremony, she let her insecurities show, faltering in her recital while the champions watched from a distance. Daruk sarcastically commented that Zelda's way of reciting was very uplifting, as she made it sound like they'd already lost to Calamity Ganon. Revali snapped back at him, as it was his idea in the first place to have this ceremony, a ceremony which he thought was completely unnecessary, as he highly disliked the young Hylian, remarking that he was on the same page as Zelda in doubting Link's abilities. Urbosa intervened, telling both of them that Zelda saw Link as a walking reminder of her own failures, as he'd achieved so much in the past years, while she was unable to awaken the dormant sealing power within her. Zelda finished reciting the ceremony, staring at the ground with a sad expression on her face, then took a glance at Link, who continued to kneel down before her. The 4 champions would overcome certain trials to prove their worth of piloting the divine beasts, and with their trials complete, they began operational training to become proficient pilots of their respective mechanical titans.
During one of Link's visits to Rito Village, Revali, the champion of the Rito, confronted Link about how much he despised him, as he, the most skilled warrior of all the Rito, and rivaled by all, was somehow tasked to merely assist the hero, simply because Link happened to possess the Master Sword. Revali smugly offered Link a chance to prove him wrong, a one-on-one duel atop Vah Meadow. This, of course, was in an attempt to mock Link's inability to fly, as he wouldn't be able to reach the divine beast on his own. Revali then sarcastically wished Link good luck in sealing the darkness, before flying off towards Vah Meadow.
Zelda and Link began to make their way towards Goron City in order to make some adjustments to Divine Beast Vah Rudania, with the intention to make it easier for Daruk to pilot. Daruk had managed to make Vah Rudania move, however there was definitely room for improvement. Zelda was astonished by the fact that the divine beasts were actually constructed by the people of the past, remarking that, in time, they too would be able to fully understand the ancient technology and use it against Ganon. As they passed by Lake Colomo, Zelda slowed her pace down before halting her movement. She turned to ask Link how proficient he was at wielding the Sword of Evil's Bane, wondering if he had yet heard the voice of the ancient spirit that resided within its blade, only heard by those worthy of wielding this sacred weapon. This spirit, of course, being Fi, the very same spirit that aided the hero of the skies eons ago during the events of Skyward Sword.
Meeting with the Goron champion Daruk on Death Mountain, he revealed he had some trouble controlling Rudania. Far more trouble than the other champions in fact, who all seemed to get a hang of controlling their divine beasts pretty easily. Asking Link for advice, the young hero forced Daruk into Vah Rudania, where they both rode around Death Mountain for the entire day, until Daruk finally got a hang of it, after which he started to have fun controlling the massive mechanical reptile. While they rode on the divine beast, Daruk took the time to admire the impressive view of Death Mountain, and told Link that even though he didn't know much about Calamity Ganon, he would do everything in his power to protect the land of Hyrule. Daruk then brought the subject of Link being Zelda's appointed knight, congratulating him on his great achievements, telling him that Zelda had a very strong personality, so strong that it made her stubborn and unable to see the full picture of things most of the time. As long as Link remembered that, he told him, Link would do just fine. Suddenly, the mountain began to shake violently, as Death Mountain hurled a giant boulder their way. Acting quickly, Daruk stood between Link and the rock and activated his power of protection, shielding both of them from the incoming projectile. Forgetting what he was saying before the rock incident, he wondered why Death Mountain suddenly began acting up, when it had been quiet for decades, wondering if it had anything to do with Calamity Ganon.
Getting a chance to sneak away from Link, whose everlasting silence only made Zelda grow more agitated with each passing second as she didn't know what the hero thought of her, wrongfully believing that he, like many in Hyrule, thought of her as a failure for not being able to awaken her divine power, Zelda made her way to the ancient columns south of Rito Village, an abandoned structure of a past Hylian civilization, to investigate the inactive Sheikah shrine that lay dormant within the ruins. Understanding that they were made exclusively for the hero, Zelda still tried to open them regardless with the use of the Sheikah slate, to no avail. It was then that Link managed to track her down. Dismounting his black-maned horse and running to Zelda, the princess annoyed by his very presence. Zelda told Link that she was not in need of an escort, that she could take care of herself perfectly fine, and ordered Link to return back to the castle and relay that message to her father, the king. Link, however, silently followed the princess, his sole duty being to protect her at all costs. Zelda had enough. Furiously turning to look at Link, she angrily yelled at him to stop following her. That night, Zelda revealed in her diary that she felt guilty after lashing out at Link like that, which only made her even more stressed than she was before.
Link met with the Gerudo champion Urbosa when he made his way to Gerudo Desert, as Zelda, exploiting the Gerudo law that forbade men from entering their town, managed to slip away from his protector and asked her for help. Urbosa, being chief of the Gerudo, told Link of a little trick that would allow him to enter, dressing up as a Gerudo woman. Despite Link entering the town, he was unable to find Zelda. Urbosa promised to let Link know if she happened to see her, and Link made his way back home to Hateno village. The following day, Urbosa accompanied Zelda as she went to research divine beast Vah Naboris. After an extensive day of hard work, Zelda, exhausted, fell asleep within the watchful Urbosa within Naboris. As expected, Urbosa sent word to Link, who showed up to the divine beast faster than she expected. Urbosa, knowing the troublesome relationship between the princess and the hero, felt that all she could do to help them bond was to tell Link more about Zelda. She told him that Zelda got frustrated every time that she saw him carrying the Master Sword on his back, as she felt she was failing at fulfilling her own destiny of awakening her divine power, and reassured him that he was not to blame. She continued by explaining that ever since she was a young girl, Zelda went through extensive daily routines to show her dedication in awakening her power, even having passed out in the freezing waters of the springs, forcing Urbosa to drag her out. The sailing power showed no signs of awakening. Urbosa reminded Link to protect her with his life, as having the duty of protecting someone so special was a great honor. Pointing out the cold climate of the desert night, Urbosa thought it wise to take Zelda back inside. However, as she cheekily smiled, she thought of another way and snapped her fingers, summoning a bolt of lightning with her champion powers that struck the ground near Vana Boris with ferocious force, waking Zelda up in a state of total shock. With Zelda confused to see Link standing behind them, Urbosa broke out into a hysterical laughter.
The following day, Zelda would come to understand the hard way the need of an escort. From the shadows, the sinister Yiga clan ambushed the princess as she travelled the desert alone. Running for her life, the princess attempted to escape the deadly assassins, but soon found herself cornered without a means to escape. As one of the Yiga clansmen raised his sickle to strike at the defenseless princess, Link, appearing from seemingly thin air, dispatched the assassin with a swift strike. Zelda was in awe. Link, despite all that she had put him through, despite treating him so poorly, was there, between her and the blades of the Yiga, protecting her with his life. He was there for her, he was always there for her, but she was too blind to see it before. Zelda would never forget Link's selflessness. The following day, Zelda apologized to Link for the way she'd treated him and tried to be more open from that moment on. Bit by bit, Zelda managed to get Link to open up to her as well. Not only did she learn that he was a glutton, unable to resist any meal, but also the truth behind his silence, despite it being difficult for the hero to share. Link told her that with so much at stake, and so many eyes upon him, he felt it necessary to stay strong and to silently bear any burden that may befall him. Zelda related to this. She believed Link to be a gifted person who never faced any hardships, but she couldn't have been more wrong. She was so focused on her own problems that she was blind to the problems of other people. Zelda wished to continue talking to Link and to find out more about him, and perhaps she could even share her own thoughts and problems that had built up over the years to him as well.
As they traveled through the Elden Canyon, Link and Zelda were faced with a group of powerful monsters, consisting of several bokoblins and white mane Lynels. With his courage at his side, Link successfully defeated all of them single-handedly. As Zelda tended his wounds, she reminded him that there was a fine line between courage and recklessness, advising him to be more careful. Looking back at the monster massacre, Zelda expressed her unease about the growing numbers of Hyrule's monsters, fearing that the increasing attacks might be an omen of Calamity Ganon's return fast approaching, and if that were the case, they'd need to make preparations as soon as possible to be ready for the worst.
Zelda and Link enjoyed some time together, kneeling on the grassy hillsides of Urch Plain as the princess showed the young hero many of the rare types of flowers in Hyrule, excitedly taking pictures of all of them with the Sheikah slate as she relayed interesting details about each of them to Link. Zelda then gasped as she spotted a solitary blue flower called the Silent Princess. Zelda explained that it was an endangered species, unable to be grown domestically despite their best efforts, only being able to thrive in the wild, and hoped that the rare species would manage to prosper on its own. Zelda then quickly reached out to grab something that scuttered near the flower, and hurried to show it to Link, unable to contain her excitement. Opening her hands, she revealed that it was a hot-footed frog, explaining to Link that studies had shown that ingesting one of these creatures could enhance someone's abilities, and urged Link, whose level of physical fitness made him a perfect study subject, to taste it.
Mipha had finished sewing together a special Sora armor for Link, and hoped to give it to him the next time she saw him, knowing that the Hylian would soon make his way through Sora's domain. Countless generations of Sora princesses would only give that armor to those who they had sworn they would marry, the armor serving, in a way, as an engagement ring. Mipha clearly had feelings for Link, but the idea that he didn't feel the same way for her made her question if she should go through with it. She remembered the tales of the ancient Sora princess, Ruto, who fell in love with the Hylian hero of time, and prayed to her to grant her the courage to gift it to Link. Knowing this would be a rare occasion where Link would not be accompanying the princess, Mipha thought on taking him on a ride on Vah Ruta, where they would be able to spend some quality time alone. However, Mipha opted to not give Link the Sora armor, at least in that moment. Sitting on the trunk of Vah Ruta, Mipha would tend to Link's battle wounds, healing them with the use of her divine champion power, as she reminisced on the time where they first met, remembering how she would heal Link each time he got hurt, just as she was doing now, always willing to care for him when in need. As Link checked the fully healed wound, Mipha expressed her concern regarding the return of Calamity Ganon, unsure of what they could really do against such a threat, not knowing of the dangers they would face. But Mipha reassured Link of one thing that she knew clearly, that no matter where, or how badly he may be hurt in the upcoming battles, she would always heal him without hesitation. Mipha then expressed to Link her hope that when things settled down after the defeat of Ganon, that perhaps they could spend some time together.
Link and Zelda sought refuge from the rain beneath a tree in Hyrule Field. As Zelda sat on a rock, she watched Link as he practiced several moves with the Master Sword, masterfully swinging the Blade of Evil's Bane through the falling droplets. As Link continued with his training exercise, Zelda noted how Link's path to becoming a Knight of Hyrule mirrored that of his own father, pointing out that his dedication to his training was quite admirable, seeing now why he was chosen by the sword that seals the darkness. As Link turned to look at a downhearted Zelda, the princess opened up on her doubts about her destiny, asking Link that if he had the freedom to become whatever he wanted, rather than what others expected him to become as he was born into a family of knights, would he, perhaps, have chosen a different path?
Zelda and Link headed to the Spring of Courage in the southern jungle of Faron Woods, where Zelda spent many hours praying, in hopes that her powers would show any signs of awakening. But alas, her efforts were in vain. Link accompanied Zelda back to Hyrule Castle, where she cheerfully oversaw the experiments of the Guardians taking place on a courtyard from above the bridge leading to her study. As a scientist did some tests on a Guardian Stalker, making it perform standard actions, Zelda excitedly told Link that if they kept this up, they would soon learn all they needed to know about the Guardians and the Divine Beasts to successfully face and defeat Calamity Ganon upon his return. However, her joyful expression soon turned to that of anguish, as she heard the stern voice of her father, the king, asking her what she was doing. Link kneeled before the king, as Zelda fought to keep her frustration in check. She explained that she was assessing the progress being made with the Guardians, as they would be essential in facing against Calamity Ganon. Rome cut her off, already knowing that they were essential to Hyrule's future, and reminding his daughter of her responsibilities as a princess, asking her when she was going to start treating the severity of the situation seriously. Those words deeply hurt the princess. Despite all the hard work she had put in to try and awaken her power, her own father didn't recognize her efforts. She explained how she had recently returned from the Spring of Courage, dedicating her entire energy to praying to the goddess. Rome interrupted her again, reprimanding her for being here wasting her time with the Guardians instead of continuing her training. He expected her to train relentlessly and without cease to unlock her sacred power that would seal Calamity Ganon away. Zelda defended herself, telling her father that she was doing everything she possibly could, and hoped that he would allow her to contribute in any way to the research of the Guardians. The king cut her off for a final time. He had enough of her excuses. He forbade her from continuing her research of ancient technology and commanded her to dedicate her entire attention to awaken her sealing magic, asking her to prove those who spoke behind her back wrong, as they believed that she would be a ruler of a ruined kingdom. With that said, the king turned to go back inside the castle, leaving the young princess ashamed and on the verge of tears. Zelda and Link made plans for the following morning to journey to the Spring of Power in the northern region of Akkala to continue her training, but Zelda believed that it too would result in failure.
That night, Zelda had a peculiar dream. She described in her diary that within the pitch dark, a solitary woman surrounded by ethereal light gazed upon her, beautiful like no other woman she had ever seen. She wondered if it was a fairy or even a goddess, as the being of light urgently spoke out to her. Despite Zelda not being able to hear her words, this being was perhaps her deceased mother, trying to reach out from beyond her grave, or even the goddess Hylia herself, Zelda's long-distant ancestor, trying to help her descendant in awakening her powers. Zelda wondered, had she awakened her power if she could have heard the voice of this mysterious woman? Or if the entirety of her dream was even real, or merely a manifestation of her own fears. The following day, Zelda and Link travelled to the Spring of Power. Despite praying for hours on end, Zelda was unable to awaken her powers, and directed her exasperation to the statue of the goddess Hylia, as if she were talking to the goddess herself. She told the statue that her grandmother could hear the voices coming from the sacred realm, and that her mother insisted that she, too, would develop this divine skill. And yet, despite all of it, she didn't hear or feel anything. Teary-eyed and overcome by frustration, she cursed the ancient goddess and asked her, begged her for a concrete answer, to reveal why she couldn't awaken this power, for her to tell her what was wrong with her.
Returning from a field survey, the princess and her knight rode their horses through the fields towards Sunnyden Park, bathed in the light of the twilight hour, as Zelda thanked Link for his advice on how to trick her royal white stallion. Reaching the park, Zelda directed Link's attention to Mount Lanayru, the snow-covered mountain named after the goddess of wisdom. She explained that laws forbade anyone under the age of 17 to venture to the mountain, as only the wise were granted permission to climb it. Being Princess Zelda's birthday the very next day, she planned to go up the mountain to pray in the Spring of Wisdom, in hopes that her sealing power would finally awaken. When Link arrived at the castle that morning, they met with the other champions who decided to accompany Zelda to the mountain for support, and so the group made their way to Mount Lanayru. King Rome was told that Zelda had gone to the Spring of Wisdom, and knowing that this was likely her last chance to awaken her power, he decided that rather than scold her upon her return, he would speak to her kindly, perhaps even encourage her to keep researching the ancient relics, as perhaps her power might awaken some other way. All King Rome could do now was wait for his beloved daughter to return home from her journey to the mountain. Zelda had not seen her father since the confrontation, the last words to each other ending in a bad note. Zelda planned to meet him as soon as she returned from the mountain, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that something awful was about to happen. And that were the events leading up to the Great Calamity. I'd like to give a huge thanks to Celtic for collaborating with me on this video. A link to his channel will be in the description and pinned comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get notified of future uploads. Also, consider following me on Twitter and Instagram if you haven't already to stay in touch. This has been Solo Lore, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.